Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. So I don't know about you, but personally I've always felt like there's a very unique dreamlike quality that Japan has. The people, the culture, the cities and villages, everything is just so different from any other country in the world. But as it is with everything else, nothing is perfect, and neither is Japan. In fact, today's video is exactly about that. The side of Japan that is not so perfect and dreamlike. And you know how that saying goes, as above, so below. It means things in this universe usually have equal counterparts. Like if a person seems too perfect on the surface, they're probably hiding their equally dark and destructive side from society. Well, it applies to Japan really well, because just like its beautiful side is unmatched globally, so is its dark and evil side. I don't over-exaggerate what I say just to sort of sell my video to the viewers. And I'm telling you, the crimes from Japan do qualify as the worst in the world and in history. Anyway, let's start the video now. Enjoy. In Japan, cannibalism is often depicted in anime, but in real life, one man became famous after killing a foreign woman and eating her flesh. This is the story of Issei Sagawa, a Japanese man who got away with cannibalism in France and later became a public figure in Japan. The story begins on June 13, 1981, in the Bois de Boulogne, a large park in Paris. That day, two joggers found two suitcases floating in a lake. Inside, they discovered the dismembered body of a woman. The police quickly started searching for a suspect. Witnesses reported seeing the suitcases, and one key tip came from a taxi driver. He said that on June 13th, he had picked up a small Asian man with two extremely heavy suitcases. He even joked, "Are you getting rid of a body based on how heavy they were?" Using the driver's description and pickup location, police identified a suspect. On June 15, 1981, police raided the suspect's home. Inside, they found a body part cooking in a frying pan and the victim's ID. The man was arrested immediately. He showed no remorse and even had a calm expression. The victim was 25-year-old Renee Hartevelt, a Dutch student at Sorbonne University. She had visited the home of 32-year-old Sagawa, a fellow doctoral student, to help him translate a German poem. While others avoided Sagawa, Hartevelt had shown him kindness, as he was a lonely foreigner. However, Sagawa had different intentions. Sagawa had planned to eat Hartevelt and prepared a knife, a box cutter, and a gun. When she arrived, he tried to touch her, but when she rejected him, he shot her in the head. He then performed necrophilia before cutting up her body, taking 30 photos to document the process. He kept some body parts in the fridge and cooked others. After his arrest, he said, "I had a great desire to eat her. I thought that if I did, she would become a part of me forever." As a child, he became interested in cannibalism after his uncle read him a fairy tale about kidnapping and eating children. In high school, he met with a psychiatrist, but his condition was not considered serious. Then, in 1972, at 22 years old, he broke into a German woman's home while studying at Wako University. His goal was not rape, but to cut off and eat part of her body. She woke up, overpowered him, and escaped. His father, Akira Sagawa, a wealthy businessman, paid to settle the case. Sagawa was insecure about his small size, only 151 centimeters tall and weighing 48 kilograms. He became obsessed with tall white women, not in a romantic way, but because he wanted to eat them. After his crime, he said he felt weak and believed eating strong Western women would make him stronger. Since Sagawa was a Japanese national who committed a crime in France against a Dutch victim, the case became complicated. He confessed to the crime but was sent to a mental hospital for evaluation. His father hired a lawyer who argued that Sagawa was being held too long without trial. In October 1982, a French court ruled that he was insane and could not be prosecuted. He was sent to a psychiatric hospital indefinitely. However, in 1984, French authorities unexpectedly deported Sagawa to Japan. The decision was controversial, as some believed he was only deported because his victim was not French. Hartevelt's family was told that he would face trial in Japan, but this never happened. Since he had not been convicted in France, the case records were sealed, making it impossible to try him in Japan. He was held at Matsuzawa Hospital in Tokyo, where Japanese doctors declared him sane. Since Japan did not accept the French case files, they had no legal grounds to punish him. Less than 2 years later, on August 12, 1986, he was released. This meant that Sagawa never faced any real punishment. After his release, the Japanese media turned him into a celebrity. He said, "The press made me the godfather of cannibalism, and I am happy about that. I will always see the world as a cannibal." He wrote a book called In the Fog, where he graphically described how different parts of Hardevelt's body tasted. He even insulted her, writing that after eating her, he held up her head and said, "You were really tasty." His book sold over 500,000 copies and was translated into multiple languages. Sagawa appeared in adult films, drawing attention for acting alongside white actresses. He was even invited onto a cooking show where he talked about eating raw meat. He starred in a commercial and made money by drawing nude women. From 1986 to 1997, he lived like a celebrity. However, with the rise of the internet in the late 1990s, more people condemned his crimes. While other cannibals existed, he was the only one who turned his crime into a business. His lack of remorse and constant smiling on TV disgusted many. Eventually, his father's company collapsed, leaving him in financial ruin. In 2005, his father died from a stroke. At his funeral, Sagawa's mother ignored him, and shortly after, she committed suicide. In her will, she stated that her husband's inheritance should not go to their son. Left without financial support, Sagawa moved into a small apartment provided by his younger brother. In 2013, at 64 years old, Sagawa suffered a stroke, leaving him unable to move. His condition worsened over time. On November 24, 2022, at the age of 73, Issei Sagawa died of pneumonia, and his family held a small funeral on December 2, 2022. Hikari City mother and child murder case. In 1999, an 18-year-old with a twisted mind came up with a horrible plan. He dressed up as a handyman and went door to door, looking for women who were home alone. After knocking on a few doors, he managed to enter one house by pretending he was there for work. Inside, he found a woman, and things quickly turned violent. He attacked and killed her. But the nightmare didn't end there. The woman wasn't alone. Her 11-month-old baby was in the house too. The baby's cries filled the air, and instead of leaving, the killer took the child's life as well. It didn't take long for the police to catch him. When they questioned him, his answers were deeply disturbing. He showed almost no emotion about what he had done. When asked about the baby, he coldly said, "I wasn't trying to kill the infant. I just tied a bow around its neck to make it stop crying." His actions were even more horrifying because, after killing the woman, he sexually assaulted her. He later claimed he did this because he had read in a novel that it was part of a resurrection ritual. The killer was first given a life sentence. However, this was later changed to the death penalty. This decision sparked huge debate in Japan. At the time, Japan's law considered people under 20 as minors, meaning that, legally, he wasn't seen as an adult. But after committing such brutal crimes at 18, many believed he was old enough to face the ultimate punishment. Maria Ouchi. In December 2014, police in Nagoya City received a missing persons report for 77-year-old Tomoko Mori. Her husband reported her missing after she vanished while out sharing her faith, something she often did as a devout Jehovah's Witness. For over a month, Tomoko's whereabouts remained a mystery. During the investigation, police kept coming across the name Maria Ouchi, a young woman who had been seen with Tomoko before her disappearance. At first, it seemed unlikely that Maria was involved. She was just a student. But as they looked deeper, all the clues kept leading back to her. When police finally reached out to Maria's parents, they learned she had been living with them in a different city for about a month. On January 26, 2015, Maria returned to Nagoya and voluntarily went to the police station for questioning. That's when she led officers to her apartment, where they made a horrifying discovery. In her bathroom, they found Tomoko's body. She was fully dressed, with a scarf wrapped around her neck, lying on the floor with dried blood around her. She had multiple injuries, likely from a sharp object. After police had seen all of this, Maria was obviously arrested immediately. But what led to all of this, and were there any other crimes as well that she committed? Let's find out. Maria was born in Sendai in 1995 and was the oldest of two daughters. Her father, once an agricultural researcher, later managed an apartment complex. But her relationship with him was tense. She later claimed he was controlling. Her mother, who had worked as a store clerk, quit her job after Maria's crimes, unable to face the public. Maria's behavior started changing in elementary school. In Japan, how children address their parents reflects their relationship with them. Most kids call their mother mama and their father papa, showing warmth and respect. But Maria stopped calling her mother mama and instead used her first name. She also stopped calling her father papa and switched to waji, a rough masculine term often used by boys. She also changed how she referred to herself, using a masculine word for I and sometimes adding sama, a term that elevates oneself, making it sound arrogant, almost like calling herself the great me. By second grade, Maria had already stolen stationery, brushing it off by saying, "Everyone else does it." This hinted at a deeper problem. She didn't seem to understand right from wrong. People who knew her described her as unusual but well-liked, cheerful, and surrounded by friends. But beneath her friendly exterior, she had a strange fascination with crime, murder, and disturbing pranks. In 6th grade, Maria took her pranks to a new level. She tried to poison her male teacher by slipping boric acid, a toxic substance used in insecticides, into his lunch. When that plan failed because a friend lost the substance, she settled for putting staples and eraser shavings into his food instead. In middle school, Maria's interests became even darker. She was obsessed with Tsutomu Miyazaki and Sato Sakakibara, two of Japan's most notorious child killers. She admired their ability to commit brutal crimes and even started collecting survival knives online. At home, her behavior terrified her younger sister. Maria would threaten her and wave knives and axes around, keeping her silent out of fear. When she entered high school, Maria's choices made her stand out. She cut her hair short and wore a boy's uniform instead of the standard girl's attire. Despite her unusual behavior, she was well-liked, described as intelligent, athletic, and charismatic. After high school, she got into Nagoya University's prestigious science department. Living alone, she joined the cheerleading squad and piano club, blending into college life. But according to her mother, Maria had already started experimenting with drugs, saying it was natural since she was studying science. After Maria's arrest for Tomoko's murder, police questioned her extensively. What started as a missing persons case soon unraveled into something much more sinister. During the interrogation, Maria confessed to several other crimes, later known as the thallium incidents. It turned out she had been poisoning people for years. On May 27, 2012, while still in high school, Maria invited an old classmate to a karaoke bar. There, she slipped thallium sulfate, a deadly poison, into her friend's drink. Her friend immediately noticed something was wrong and spit it out, but it was too late. She later suffered hair loss, numbness in her limbs, and other severe symptoms. At the time, doctors couldn't figure out what was causing her illness. Maria didn't stop there. From May to July 2012, she poisoned more male classmates. One boy became so sick that he was hospitalized in October. The poisoning left him with severe vision loss, forcing him to transfer to a special needs class, changing his life forever. When asked why she did it, Maria's answer was chilling. She wasn't angry at them. She just wanted to see what poison could do. In 2014, the same year she murdered Tomoko, she experimented with Molotov cocktails. She set at least 2 fires. On August 29, 2014, she tried to burn down a house in Sendai, but wasn't caught. On December 13th, just a week after murdering Tomoko, she set fire to another house. This time, an elderly woman died in the blaze. When questioned, Maria claimed she had targeted the wrong house. Her real goal? To see a burned corpse. On December 7, 2014, Tomoko Mori attended a meeting where she met Maria. Maria pretended to be interested in learning about her faith, and Tomoko, eager to share, accepted an invitation to Maria's apartment. But as soon as they arrived, Maria attacked her. She struck Tomoko's head multiple times with an axe, then strangled her with a scarf. Afterward, she dragged the body into the bathroom and took photos, calling them records of the experiment result. The next day, she left town and returned to her parents' home, leaving Tomoko's body behind. Maria's crimes shocked Japan. Because of their severity, she was prosecuted as an adult. During her trial, her lack of remorse was chilling. When asked why she killed Tomoko, she simply replied, "I just wanted to kill someone." Even in court, she said she still had the urge to kill. She admitted she liked seeing the judge, attorneys, and prosecutors wearing ties because she imagined strangling them with them. Her disturbing comments and lack of regret led the court to make an exception to the law protecting minors' identities. Maria's name and face were published in Japanese media. She was found guilty of murder, attempted murder, and arson. Maria Ouchi remains one of Japan's most terrifying cases of a killer driven purely by curiosity. Someone who didn't kill out of hatred or revenge, but simply to see what would happen. In 2014, a 16-year-old girl, let's call her Heather, was already showing disturbing behavior. She had frequent emotional outbursts, enjoyed killing cats, and had even tried to murder her own father by attacking him with a baseball bat while he slept. Instead of reporting her or getting her help, Heather's family decided to send her away. They got her an apartment in the city, hoping that living alone would somehow fix the problem. But this turned out to be the worst decision they could have made. One day, Heather invited a classmate, Iwa Matsuo, over to her apartment to hang out. Iwa was a 16-year-old bright, friendly, and trusting student. She had no reason to suspect anything bad would happen. But she had no idea that Heather had already told her stepmother that she was curious about killing people. On July 26th, when Iwa arrived at Heather's place, she walked straight into a trap. Heather attacked her from behind with a hammer and then strangled her to death. This wasn't an accident or done out of anger. Heather had planned it. She simply wanted to know what it felt like to kill someone and cut up their body. When Iwa didn't come home, her mother called the police. The next day, on July 27th, officers arrived at Heather's apartment and found Iwa's dismembered body. Heather wasn't there at the time, but police found her nearby. At first, she denied even knowing Iwa, which made no sense. What was she trying to claim? That someone else broke in, killed Iwa, and left her body there? Eventually, though, she admitted to the murder. Heather was sent to a juvenile facility for treatment, but the story didn't end there. Her father, overwhelmed with guilt, took his own life, saying he didn't deserve to live. Japan is known for its advanced technology, and one of the most famous examples is its vending machines. You can find everything in them, from drinks and hot coffee to soup, umbrellas, and even electronics. Tourists love discovering the unusual items these machines offer, often sharing their finds online. Meanwhile, locals rely on them for daily convenience, sometimes even getting lucky by finding a free drink or some loose change nearby. But what if that luck takes a dark turn? In 1985, Japan was shaken by a string of deaths linked to something as ordinary as bottled vitamin drinks from vending machines. These weren't accidents. They were deliberate, carefully planned murders. On May 30th, 1985, a 45-year-old truck driver died after being sick for nearly a month. When doctors examined his body, they found something alarming: high levels of paraquat dichloride, a deadly herbicide used for killing weeds. At the time, paraquat was common in Japan's agriculture, but it was also extremely toxic to humans. Even a tiny amount could cause severe damage, either killing within hours or dragging the victim through days of agonizing illness. Exposure to paraquat could burn the skin, damage blood vessels, and if swallowed, destroy tissues in the throat and lungs. Shockingly, in 1985, it was easy to get paraquat. You didn't need a prescription or even an ID, just proof that you needed it for farming. When investigators looked into the truck driver's case, they considered two possibilities: suicide or murder. They questioned his family and friends, and a disturbing discovery emerged. The man had stopped at a vending machine one day after work, where he spotted a bottle of Oronamin C, a popular vitamin drink, already sitting in the takeout slot. Thinking nothing of it, he took the bottle and drank it. Soon after, he began vomiting violently and was rushed to the hospital, where his health rapidly declined. At first, authorities thought he might have accidentally poisoned himself, perhaps by mishandling paraquat at work. After all, it only took 8 to 16 milliliters, less than a tablespoon, to kill a healthy adult, and there was no antidote at the time. But then, another death occurred. On September 5th, a 44-year-old executive named Takahashi Sakai bought 2 bottles of Oronamen C from a vending machine. He died 6 weeks later. Then, on September 11th, a 52-year-old man in Osaka grabbed 2 bottles of Oronamen C from a vending machine after a fishing trip. He took them home, unaware of the danger. 3 days later, he was dead, and Paraquat was found in the leftover drinks. On September 12th, a 22-year-old student in Matsusaka City found what seemed like a lucky extra bottle of real gold, another vitamin drink, sitting in a vending machine takeout slot. He took it home, but 2 days later, he was dead. Tests revealed diquat, another toxic herbicide, in his body and the drink. A week later, on September 19th, a 30-year-old man in Imabari town found a bottle of Coca-Cola under a vending machine. He drank it, not thinking twice. Almost immediately, he felt sick and collapsed. He was rushed to the hospital, but despite their efforts, he died 3 days later. These were not isolated incidents. By the end of 1985, 12 people across Japan had fallen victim to poisoned drinks. The deaths were scattered across the country, with most occurring in western and central Japan and Tokyo. The victims ranged from a 17-year-old teenager to a 69-year-old man. Investigators soon realized why Oronamen C was the most commonly used drink in the poisonings. At the time, its manufacturer, Otsuka Pharmaceutical, was running a buy one get one free promotion to attract younger consumers. The killer took advantage of this campaign, planting poisoned drinks near vending machines so victims would assume they had simply gotten lucky with a free extra bottle. Solving the case, however, was almost impossible. In 1985, vending machines didn't have surveillance cameras, leaving authorities with no footage to review. The bottles were carefully handled, no fingerprints, no DNA, no clues. And then, the poisoning suddenly stopped. With no new victims, the case quickly went cold. Investigators were left wondering why people didn't notice that the drinks had been tampered with. To understand this, they looked back at a similar case from 1977, when Coca-Cola bottles laced with cyanide killed several people in Tokyo and Osaka. That case had made people fearful of vending machines, but in response, beverage companies started using tamper-evident packaging, such as plastic seals and pull tabs. However, in 1985, Japan was still in the middle of transitioning to these safety measures. Many people weren't yet used to checking bottle seals, making it easy for them to miss the signs of tampering. Despite an extensive investigation, no suspect was ever identified, and the statute of limitations expired in 1992. Authorities believed the crimes were committed by a single person, but they found no connection between the victims. There was no motive, no demands for money, and no threats sent to drink manufacturers like Otsuka or Coca-Cola Japan. In response to public fear, Japan's national police launched a nationwide campaign warning people to inspect drinks before consuming them. They put up 1.3 million warning stickers on vending machines and ran ads in newspapers urging caution. With no answers, theories about the killer's motive spread. Some experts suggested that the crimes reflected deeper social issues. Japan's strict, work-focused culture often caused extreme stress, leading some individuals to lash out in unpredictable ways. A criminal psychology professor in Tokyo speculated that the killer may have been taking out their frustrations on random people. Another expert, Susumu Uda, believed the culprit enjoyed the thrill of seeing victims suffer, a behavior known in Japan as yukaihan, a term describing criminals who harm others purely for the power and excitement of it. The case also inspired copycat crimes, with several people attempting similar poisonings in the following months. Some even faked poisonings for attention. In one case, a high school student in Osaka poisoned his own drink, hoping to be hospitalized and gain sympathy from his classmates. Though the original 1985 case faded into history, the fear never fully disappeared. In 2019, police in Akita Prefecture found a beer can laced with pesticides in a vending machine takeout slot. A man noticed an extra can pop out with his purchase and found it suspicious. Upon inspection, the can had a tiny hole in the bottom, leaking an odd blue liquid. Though authorities investigated, they never found a suspect. The Wednesday Strangler. To this day, Japan still has no answers in the case of the Wednesday Strangler. Over a span of 14 years, multiple women went missing and their bodies were later found. All but one of them disappeared on a Wednesday. Between 1975 and 1989, 7 women vanished and were later found dead. 5 of them were confirmed to have been strangled. The other 2 may have been strangled as well, but their remains were too damaged to say for sure. Aside from the Wednesday pattern and the method of killing, there didn't seem to be any connection between the victims. Their ages ranged from 11 to 50 years old. They had different jobs and they lived in different places. 3 of the victims were found dumped off a cliff in Kitagata-cho, which led to this part of the case being called the Kitagata Affair. A suspect was arrested for those 3 murders, but due to lack of evidence, he was later acquitted. Even the police admitted they had messed up. They interrogated him too aggressively and might have accidentally given away too much information about the case. Eventually, the statute of limitations expired, meaning these crimes could no longer be prosecuted, and the case remains unsolved. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm not convinced one person was behind all of this. A Wednesday pattern over 14 years doesn't feel like the strongest connection. Plus, how easy would it be for a copycat killer to take someone on a Wednesday just to throw off investigators? This is the story of Tomohiro Sato. It all started on January 15, 2012 in Asahikawa City, Hokkaido. It was a freezing, snowy night, but the city was still bustling. Most people were indoors, staying warm with their families. But inside the Sato household, things were far from peaceful. Neighbors later reported hearing loud shouting from the house, a boy and a woman arguing. Their voices grew louder until there was a sudden bang, followed by the sound of something breaking. The next day, local police received a report that 13-year-old Tomu Sato was missing. Tomu was a bright and well-liked boy in his community. His parents had divorced when he was just 2 years old, and he was raised by his mother, Mai, along with his younger sister, Aika. Little is known about his father or why his parents separated. Tomu was popular and admired by his friends. He once told people he wanted to become a doctor so he could take care of his mother. His academic achievements were impressive. He had passed the entrance exam for a highly competitive junior high school connected to Hokkaido University of Education. The events leading to Tomu's disappearance began on January 14, 2012, the day before he went missing. While their mother was out, Tomu and his sister got into an argument over what to watch on TV. Tomu wanted to watch Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, while Aika wanted to watch a drama called Perfect Son. What started as a small disagreement quickly escalated into yelling. In a fit of frustration, Tomu did something shocking. He threw his Nintendo DS against the wall, shattering it. This was significant because he had bought the DS with money he earned from helping his mother with chores. Breaking something so valuable suggested he was dealing with deeper emotions. Still angry, he punched the wall, leaving a hole in it before storming off to his room. The next day, their mother, Mai, returned home and saw the damage. She asked Tomu to clean up and apologize to his sister. While he was cleaning, she noticed the broken DS and asked him what happened. Tomu, still upset, snapped, "I bought it with my own money. I can do whatever I want with it." He ignored his mother and locked himself in his room. Mai assumed he just needed time to cool off and left him alone. But around 9:15 p.m., she heard the front door slam shut. She thought he had gone out to clear his head and would be back soon. But as time passed, she grew worried. It was freezing outside, and he had left wearing only a t-shirt and thin pants. She searched the house, hoping he had come back without her noticing, but he was nowhere to be found. She did find that his jacket and wallet were missing, but his wallet only contained 1,000 yen, about $10, and a few bus tickets. His phone was still in his room, meaning she had no way to contact him. Panicked, Mai rushed outside into the heavy snowfall to search for her son. That night, temperatures dropped to -5°C, and she feared the worst. The next day, Mai reported Tomu missing, and police launched a large-scale search. Given how cold it was and how lightly he was dressed, they believed he couldn't have gone far. They checked surveillance footage and interviewed taxi drivers, but found no trace of him. It was as if he had vanished into thin air. As the snow melted, the search intensified. Helicopters scanned rivers, and search teams combed through forests and fields. Still, there was no sign of Tomu. Some people feared he had died in the cold and was buried under the snow, but no evidence supported this theory. Posters with Tomu's face were put up across the city and shared online. His mother and sister even appeared on TV, pleading for information. Aika created a Twitter account to spread awareness, though her last post was in 2015. During a TV appearance, Aika expressed deep guilt, blaming herself for their argument, which may have driven her brother to leave. Years later, Mai received two eerie messages, one on August 15, 2016, and another on August 14, 2019. Both contained the exact same words, "Help Tomu," written in katakana. The messages came from a public phone, making it impossible to trace the sender. Was it really Tomu, or was someone playing a cruel prank? Despite reporting the messages to police, no new leads emerged. The family also received strange phone calls from unknown numbers. When they answered, the caller remained silent before hanging up. Over the years, there have been multiple alleged sightings of Tomu. In 2015, someone claimed to have seen him working as a host in Kabukicho, Tokyo's nightlife district. Hosts entertain female clients in clubs, and this particular host reportedly had a birthmark between his eyebrows, just like Tomu. He also said he had run away from home in Asahikawa, matching Tomu's background. However, some believe this was just a coincidence. In host clubs, it's common for hosts to invent tragic backstories to gain sympathy and money. Other reports placed Tomu in Shinjuku's LGBTQ+ district, where someone resembling him was allegedly working in a host club that catered to male customers. Another sighting placed him in Ikebukuro, near a department store. Several theories have emerged over the years. Some believe Tomu left home intentionally. Though his mother claimed he had little money, he could have hidden extra cash or hitchhiked to avoid detection. Another theory is that he went to his father. Some find it odd that Tomu's father never spoke publicly about his disappearance. However, police would have investigated this early on, and no evidence linked him to the case. Some believe Tomu may have been abducted, possibly for human trafficking. His good looks could have made him a target. One theory suggests he died that night. Others think Tomu may have frozen to death, fallen into a river, or even taken his own life. His sudden outburst, destroying his DS, could have been a sign of deep emotional distress. And the final theory is that his mother was involved. Some suspect Mai might have been involved in Tomu's disappearance. Could she have harmed him in a moment of anger and hidden his body in the snow? Her appearance on a 2019 TV show sparked controversy. Many viewers criticized her for wearing heavy makeup and eyelash extensions, feeling it was inappropriate for a grieving mother. However, others defended her, noting she had a heart condition and may have worn makeup to hide her pale appearance. The Tsuchiura Serial Murders. This case began when a man decided he wanted to die, but not by his own hand. Instead, he wanted the death penalty and set out on a killing spree to make it happen. In 2008, a 24-year-old man, let's call him Ken, had reached his breaking point. He was struggling with school, unemployment, and deep loneliness. Up until then, he had used video games as a way to escape his depression and suicidal thoughts. At some point, Ken convinced himself that the only way to die was through execution. So, he started looking for victims. At first, he thought about attacking a school, believing that would guarantee him the death penalty. But he changed his mind because there were too many adults around. Instead, he randomly stabbed an elderly man, marking the start of his rampage. His attacks continued in Tokyo, where his desire for attention fueled his actions even more. He went to Arakawa Oki Station and stabbed multiple people, killing 2 and seriously injuring several others. Eventually, he turned himself in, hoping to get exactly what he wanted, the death penalty. During his trial, doctors diagnosed him with narcissistic personality disorder. However, despite this diagnosis, the court ruled that he was mentally stable and fully responsible for his actions. Ken got what he wanted, a death sentence. He accepted it without any appeal. The way society treats people with disabilities, whether physical or mental, reflects its values and ethics. Everyone deserves the same respect and dignity, regardless of ability. However, Attitudes toward disabled individuals vary widely across cultures, and unfortunately, some perceptions are not only dismissive, but outright cruel. Today we will examine a horrifying case where such negative views led to a terrible tragedy, the Sagamihara Stabbings, committed by Satoshi Uematsu. Despite legal reforms aimed at increasing accessibility and reducing discrimination, many disabled individuals still report facing prejudice. A 2023 survey published by the Japan Times found that around 90% of disabled people in Japan experience discrimination. Traditional societal views sometimes affect family dynamics as well. A notable example is the Japanese singer Miki Sakai, whose in-laws were ashamed of her daughter's Down syndrome. Her father-in-law even went so far as to hide her existence, only acknowledging her when he himself became incapacitated. Many disabled individuals end up in care homes because their families cannot support them. However, some maintain strong connections with their families. It was within one such care home that the horrifying events of the Sagamihara Stabbings took place. Tsukuyama, a residential care center in Kanagawa Prefecture, was run by the Kanagawa Kyudo-kai Social Welfare Organization. This large facility housed over 120 residents who were cared for by staff and volunteers. Located near the banks of the Sagami River, the facility had a peaceful, home-like atmosphere. However, after a brutal mass killing, the once thriving care home was demolished, leaving only the gymnasium and administration building standing. In July 2016, the facility became the site of one of Japan's deadliest mass murders. In a single night, a former caretaker, 26-year-old Satoshi Uematsu, murdered 19 disabled residents and injured 26 others. Just 2 hours after the attack, he turned himself in to the police, grinning as he handed over a bag of blood-stained knives. His eerie smile and apparent lack of remorse left officers deeply disturbed. He was not just a killer, he was proud of what he had done. Satoshi Uematsu was born in January 1990 near Tokyo to an artistic family. His mother was a cartoonist, and his father was an elementary school art teacher. The family moved to Sagamihara when Satoshi was 1 year old and settled there permanently. During his early school years, he was popular among his peers, known for his humor and charm. However, Satoshi changed dramatically during high school. Once seen as well-mannered, he began engaging in reckless behavior, including theft and property damage. He also started drinking at a young age, which worsened his erratic actions. Despite these issues, he was accepted into university, where he developed an interest in tattoos, something still heavily stigmatized in Japan due to its association with the Yakuza. Unbothered by societal norms, he covered his chest and arms in tattoos, dreaming of becoming a tattoo artist. However, that ambition never came to fruition. In 2012, Satoshi took a part-time job as a caregiver at Tsukuyama. Surprisingly, he initially performed well, despite a past incident in 2007 where he allegedly shoved a wheelchair-bound resident. It's unclear if this event was ever formally documented or if he faced any consequences. Despite this history, Satoshi was promoted to a full-time position in April 2013. His colleagues saw him as a clever and dedicated worker, and he even described the disabled residents as cute. However, this perception would not last. By 2014 and 2015, he was seen physically striking residents, leading to multiple investigations and warnings from his supervisors. His behavior grew increasingly volatile. In February 2016, after yet another incident of resident abuse, he resigned. Unemployed and resentful, his hatred toward disabled individuals intensified. Soon after leaving his job, Satoshi developed what he believed was a revolutionary idea. Reflecting on his time at the care facility, he saw the struggles of the residents, their families, and the staff. Instead of viewing it as a call for more support and compassion, he came to a chilling conclusion. He thought society would be better off if disabled people were eliminated entirely. Believing his idea was so important that it needed to be heard, he decided to take action. That same month, he visited the home of Tadamori Oshima, the Speaker of Japan's House of Representatives, to personally deliver a letter. In it, he proposed legalizing euthanasia for people with disabilities, arguing that it would relieve families of their burden and prevent World War III. Even more disturbingly, he detailed his willingness to carry out the killings himself. He claimed he could erase 200 to 400 disabled individuals without harming staff members. The letter included his full name, address, and other personal details, clearly indicating he was serious. At first, when authorities read the letter, they thought it was either a sick joke or a sign of mental instability. But recognizing the potential danger, they detained Satoshi for questioning. However, instead of being charged, he was sent to a psychiatric ward for evaluation. Shockingly, just 2 weeks later, in early March, he was released. The doctor in charge determined that he was not a threat, a grave miscalculation that would soon prove catastrophic. On July 25, 2016, Satoshi retrieved his car from his family home, gathered several knives, and purchased a hammer and zip ties from a hardware store. He then drove to Shinjuku, where he rented a hotel room and dyed his hair blonde. At around 1:37 a.m., on July 26th, security cameras captured his black Honda pulling up to Tsukuyama. Using his knowledge of the facility, he entered through a back window, breaking it open with a hammer. He immediately overpowered an on-duty staff member, binding and gagging them before stealing the master key. With unrestricted access, Satoshi moved through the facility methodically, stabbing sleeping residents in the neck, one by one. By the time he was finished, 19 people, aged 18 to 70, were dead, and 26 others were wounded, 13 of them critically. After his rampage, Satoshi posted on Twitter about world peace before calmly driving away. It wasn't long before police arrived, responding to the horrifying scene. At least 29 ambulances were dispatched, and devastated neighbors watched as victims were carried away to 6 different hospitals. Families of the victims were left in utter shock and grief. Following his arrest, Satoshi underwent psychiatric evaluations to determine if he was legally responsible for his actions. While he was diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder, causing him to see himself as superior and a savior, he was found mentally competent. In February 2019, he was formally charged with 19 counts of murder, 24 counts of attempted murder, and multiple other offenses. During his trial, his defense team argued that marijuana use had impaired his judgment, but Satoshi himself showed no remorse. He refused to apologize and continued expressing his belief that disabled people served no purpose in life. At one point, he even attempted to bite off his own finger as a supposed apology to the victims' families, an act that only deepened their pain. On March 16, 2020, the Yokohama District Court sentenced him to death. The judge ruled that Satoshi's crimes were not the result of a mental illness, but rather a reflection of his deeply held beliefs. Satoshi did not appeal his sentence. In April 2022, he requested a retrial but was denied in April 2023. He remains on death row at the Tokyo Detention Center. The Nagasaki Stalker Murder. In 2010, a man and a woman met on a Japanese dating app and quickly started a relationship. They went from chatting online to moving in together at an alarming speed, something that worried the woman's family. But to her, it felt like the start of a great romance. At first, the man, Tsui, was charming and caring, which is what drew her in. But as time passed, he became controlling and even abusive. He started making strict rules, limiting her freedom and isolating her from her family. The emotional and mental abuse soon turned physical. He began hurting her over the smallest things. By October 2011, her family noticed something was seriously wrong. They suspected she was being abused and, with police help, managed to get her out of the situation. She was taken away from their shared home and brought back to live with her family. That should have been the end of this nightmare. Even after their separation, Tsui couldn't let go. He started stalking and harassing her and her family, sending them threats. Then, on December 16, 2011, things took a horrifying turn. Tsui broke into her family's home and murdered her 77-year-old grandmother and 56-year-old mother before fleeing. It didn't take long for police to find him. With DNA evidence and other proof, he was quickly arrested and later sentenced to death. A small village was thrown into darkness when a 21-year-old man named Mutsuo Toi cut the electricity line. Wearing flashlights strapped to his head, he moved through the darkness in a way that eerily resembled a local tradition called yobai, or night crawling. In just an hour and a half, almost half the village's population was either killed or seriously injured. This horrifying event happened on the night of May 21st, 1938, in the rural village of Kayo near Tsuyama in Okayama Prefecture, which was then part of the Empire of Japan. Mutsuo Toi was born on March 5, 1917, in Okayama Prefecture, likely in the Chugoku Mountains on the northern side of the region. At the time, Japan was becoming more industrialized. Little is known about his parents, but they were fairly well off. Mutsuo was their second child and only son, with an older sister. Unfortunately, his happy childhood was cut short when both of his parents died from tuberculosis while he was still a baby. At the time, tuberculosis was the second leading cause of death in Japan, and there was no cure. After his parents' passing, Mutsuo and his sister were taken in by their grandmother. They first lived in a temple before settling in her home in Kayo. Kayo was a small, picturesque village surrounded by mountains. Most of the villagers were farmers, celebrating harvests with festivals and occasionally hunting wild boars. Though somewhat isolated, the village was not completely disconnected from the outside world. It even had a telephone pole. Despite having an older sister, Mutsuo was considered the head of his household, as daughters were not traditionally given that role in Japan. His grandmother had land and a steady income from farming, providing him with a stable upbringing. He occasionally helped her with farm work. Mutsuo attended Nishikamo Elementary School, where he was known as a bright and talented student. Though there are no records of his personality, people generally liked him, making him seem like a model child. But things were not always easy for him. At 14, he was diagnosed with pleurisy, a painful lung condition that made it hard to breathe. Doctors told him to avoid physical activity, which was frustrating for a teenager. After 3 months, his condition improved, and he was able to return to school. Although people in the village liked him, some felt his friendly personality was fake. He was described as pessimistic, and despite being sociable, he never formed close relationships. Mutsuo deeply loved his older sister, looking up to her as a role model. However, when she got married in 1934, he felt abandoned. This made him withdraw from social life. By 17, he had become a hikikomori, a social recluse, avoiding interactions with others. At 20, Mutsuo wanted to join the military, which would have been an honorable achievement for his family. He passed most of the tests, but the army doctor found tuberculosis in his lungs, making him ineligible for service. This was devastating for Mutsuo. When he returned to the village, word had already spread about his rejection. He felt like people saw him differently, deepening his sense of isolation. He rarely left his house after that. During this time, Mutsuo became obsessed with a crime story, the case of Sada Abe, a geisha who strangled her lover and cut off his genitals as a keepsake. He was so fascinated that he even wrote a novel, Yuto Kayomaru, inspired by the incident. Japan had many old traditions related to sex, one of which was yobai, or night crawling. This practice allowed unmarried men to sneak into women's houses at night to propose a sexual relationship. If the woman agreed, it could lead to marriage. Mutsuo was an active participant in yobai, and at first, many women accepted his advances. However, when the villagers learned about his tuberculosis, women began rejecting him. Even those who had been in relationships with him in the past wanted nothing to do with him. These constant rejections filled him with resentment. Mutsuo told an acquaintance that if he was going to die from tuberculosis anyway, he might as well commit crimes worse than Sada Abe's. People began noticing his dark thoughts, and some even reported him to the police. The authorities confiscated his firearms and revoked his gun license. But somehow, Mutsuo managed to keep or acquire another hunting rifle and ammunition. The villagers believed the police had taken care of the problem, thinking Mutsuo was now harmless and would simply waste away. They were wrong. On the night of May 20, 1938, heavy rain poured over the village. As everyone was asleep, Mutsuo made his move. At around 1 a.m., he climbed a telephone pole and cut the village's power line, plunging the entire area into darkness. Then, he went home, put on his military uniform, and strapped a katana and several knives to his waist. He loaded his hunting rifle with 200 rounds of ammunition and carried an axe. Finally, he strapped 2 flashlights to his head, imitating the night-crawling tradition. His killing spree began at home. Mutsuo entered his grandmother's bedroom. The woman who had raised him since he was 2 was sleeping soundly. With tears in his eyes, he raised his axe and decapitated her in one swing. His grandmother was his first victim, but he had many more in mind. Stepping outside, he began his killing spree. At the time, many villagers left their doors unlocked, making it easy for Mutsuo to enter their homes. Armed with a rifle, he showed no mercy, killing men, women, and children, including former lovers, the elderly, and even pregnant women. Blood stained every home he entered. His victims ranged in age from just 5 years old to 86. It seemed Mutsuo had a list of priority targets. He even traveled several kilometers to track some of them down. When he arrived at a house, both his intended victims and the homeowners were slaughtered. Near the end of his rampage, he arrived at the home of Matsugi Takeda, a 66-year-old man. Mutsuo let himself in and found the family sleeping. When Matsugi woke up and saw an armed intruder, he assumed it was a robbery and feared for his family's lives. But Mutsuo told him not to be afraid, he just needed a piece of paper. Panicked, Matsugi frantically searched but couldn't find one. Growing impatient, Mutsuo turned to Matsugi's young grandson and asked for his notebook and a pencil. The child obeyed, and Mutsuo tore a page from it. Before leaving, Mutsuo reassured them that he wouldn't harm innocent families. He looked at the young boy and encouraged him to study hard and become a great man one day. Then, he walked away. Finally, Mutsuo climbed to the summit of Mount Senjo. There, he took a moment to write his final words. When he finished, he knelt, looked toward the rising sun, aimed his rifle at his chest, and pulled the trigger. He was pronounced dead at around 5 a.m. on May 21, 1938. When authorities found his body, they also discovered his note, which revealed his reasons for the massacre. First, he expressed sorrow for killing his grandmother. He wrote that he took her life instantly because he didn't want her to live with the shame of being the grandmother of a murderer. He also apologized to his beloved sister, calling himself a boring, sickly brother. Mutsuo wrote that he had always felt like an outcast in the village and found the way people treated him oppressive. Even though his small family claimed to love him, he believed their love was mixed with pity. He argued that society should have more sympathy for those suffering from diseases like tuberculosis. In his note, he listed the people he blamed for shaping him into the person he had become. He resented his former lover, Yuriko Terakawa, for leaving him for another man, saying that if he had killed himself earlier, he could have spared himself the pain. He also blamed another past partner, Yoshiko Nishida, for rejecting him. He had a deep hatred for Suichi Terakawa, whom he saw as arrogant. Mutsuo believed Suichi had an easier time attracting women simply because he was rich. Mutsuo also mentioned that if he could be reborn, he wanted to return as a strong and healthy person so that no one would ever look down on him again. He was tired of his miserable life and wished that the gods would allow him to be happy in his next one. In total, 31 people lost their lives, including Mutsuo himself. Shortly after the massacre, Mutsuo's sister, the one he loved dearly, also passed away from tuberculosis. The village of Kayo was so traumatized by the tragedy that it changed its name, and many villagers moved away. Today, the area is mostly populated by elderly people who never left. Those who remain claim that no one has moved into the village since the massacre. The Shimoyama Incident. Another unsolved mystery in Japan, this case left people divided. Was a powerful man murdered, or did he take his own life after facing intense pressure and death threats? In 1949, Satonori Shimoyama, the first president of the Japanese National Railways, was found dead under mysterious circumstances. The day before his death, on July 4, 1949, Shimoyama released a list of 30,000 railway employees who were going to be fired as part of budget cuts. As you can imagine, this decision didn't go over well. People were furious, and Shimoyama started receiving death threats, including from high-ranking U.S. military officials. The next morning, on July 5th, Shimoyama left his home around 8:20 a.m. He made a stop at a department store, which was the last place he was seen alive at 9:37 a.m. Then, just after midnight, his dismembered body was found on the railway tracks between two stations. It was obvious that he had been hit by a train, but something didn't add up. The autopsy suggested he might have already been dead before impact. He had internal bleeding from the train collision, but there was also significant blood loss from other injuries that didn't match the accident. This case led to countless conspiracy theories. Some believed that the US military was involved, possibly to weaken the Communist Party in Japan. Others thought it was revenge from employees who lost their jobs. And then there were those who believed the stress simply pushed Shimoyama to end his own life. At the time, forensic science was limited, making it hard for investigators to reach a solid conclusion. The police never released their findings to the public, only adding fuel to the theories. The Tokyo subway sarin attack. Japan is famous for being one of the cleanest countries in the world. They've developed many ways to keep public spaces tidy, including different kinds of trash bins. But have you ever noticed that trash bins are hard to find in Japan? When you visit, you often have to carry your trash until you finally come across one. There's a reason for this, and it's not just about cleanliness. It's connected to a tragic event that changed Japan's trash bin policy, possibly forever. On the morning of March 20th, 1995, Tokyo was as busy as ever. People were commuting to work using the subway when, without warning, a deadly, invisible gas spread through 3 different train lines. That gas was sarin, a lethal nerve agent that's said to be 100 times more toxic than cyanide. Even a tiny amount can kill a person. Now imagine a large dose being released inside a packed subway train. The effects were devastating. Sarin had been used before, in 1988 during the Iran-Iraq War, but this was the first time it was used in an attack targeting civilians. The timing couldn't have been worse. It was rush hour, meaning thousands of people were inside the trains. The attack resulted in 13 deaths immediately, 50 people with severe, life-changing injuries, and over 5,000 people suffering from vision problems and other effects. Emergency responders rushed to the scene, trying to help those who had inhaled the gas. Meanwhile, an urgent investigation began. The attack shocked the nation. Who would commit such an act, and why? Authorities soon uncovered the shocking truth. The attack was carried out by Aum Shinrikyo, a dangerous Japanese doomsday cult. Aum Shinrikyo was founded by Shoko Asahara in 1987. It originally started as a yoga school, but it eventually evolved into a religious movement that blended elements of Buddhism, Hinduism, and Christianity. The cult was obsessed with the end of the world and believed that Asahara was a divine figure who could guide them through an impending apocalypse. By the late 1980s, Aum Shinrikyo had thousands of followers and growing political ambitions. Asahara even ran for office in 1990, but after he lost, the cult took a darker turn. He told his followers that the world was corrupt and needed to be purified, which led to a series of violent crimes. The cult began developing chemical weapons, including sarin gas. They built labs, recruited scientists, and even tried to manufacture botulinum toxin, one of the deadliest poisons in the world. Their goal? To create mass destruction and seize power in Japan. On the morning of the attack, 5 teams of Aum Shinrikyo members entered the subway. Each team had a similar task: carry a plastic bag filled with sarin wrapped in newspaper, board a crowded subway train, puncture the bag using an umbrella with a sharpened tip, leave the scene before the gas spread. One attacker, Yasuo Hayashi, boarded a train near Akihabara Station. He placed the sarin-filled bag on the floor, punctured it, and quickly left. The gas started leaking, and within minutes, people collapsed. Similar attacks happened at other stations, causing panic throughout Tokyo's subway system. At first, no one understood what was happening. People were fainting, struggling to breathe, and going blind. Calls flooded into emergency services. It wasn't until 10 a.m. that forensic experts confirmed the substance was sarin. By then, the damage was already done. The attack was one of the worst acts of domestic terrorism in Japan's history. As the investigation continued, authorities strongly suspected Aum Shinrikyo's involvement. Police raided the cult's headquarters and arrested multiple members, including high-ranking officials. Finally, on May 16, 1995, police arrested Shoko Asahara, the cult's leader. In total, 192 cult members were charged for various crimes related to Aum Shinrikyo, including the Sarin attack. Asahara was sentenced to death, along with 12 other high-ranking members. The trials lasted over 7 years, and Asahara continued to claim he was innocent. However, in 2018, after decades of legal battles, all 13 sentenced members were executed. After the attack, Japan became extremely cautious about public safety. One major change was removing trash bins from public spaces, especially in train stations. Because the attackers had left their sarin-filled packages near trash bins, this made people afraid that terrorists could easily hide bombs or dangerous substances inside them. At first, some stations replaced bins with clear, see-through trash cans to make it easier to check for suspicious items. However, after the 2004 Madrid train bombings, Japan decided to remove most trash bins altogether. Survivors continue to suffer from long-term health effects, and families of the victims still struggle with grief. Although Aum Shinrikyo was officially disbanded in 2000, it never truly disappeared. Instead, it rebranded itself as Aleph and continued spreading its beliefs. Some members broke away and formed new religious groups, claiming they had distanced themselves from Asahara's teachings. Even today, the cult is still active. They recruit new followers through manga, anime, and even children's games featuring Asahara's image. For the victims and their families, knowing that the cult responsible for the worst terrorist attack in Japan's history is still operating is deeply painful. There are even theories that powerful figures in Japan's government or society may be protecting the cult for unknown reasons. However, there is no solid proof of this.